Australia's race to contain another outbreak. The family lending a helping hand in the hope of encouraging a doctor to the bush. And rethinking an ambitious program to reintroduce a once common native species. Hello and welcome to ABC Regional News. I'm Miriam with a closer look at what's making headlines in regional and rural Australia. Victoria is once again locked down to try to halt the coronavirus outbreak that's spreading at an alarming rate. Tough new restrictions came into force for the entire state from midnight Thursday. This time around, there are 5 reasons Victorians will be allowed to leave their homes. Shopping for necessary goods and services. Exercise for a maximum of 2 hours with just one other person. The shopping and exercise should be within 5 kilometres of the home. You can leave your home for authorised work or permitted education, caregiving, compassionate and medical grounds. And the 5th reason is to get vaccinated. The vaccine rollout is being expanded, with people aged 40 to 49 now able to get a Pfizer jab, but bookings are essential.
The only way through this pandemic is everyone getting vaccinated as quickly as you are eligible, and for the Commonwealth to agree to an alternative quarantine arrangement, particularly for high-risk individuals. And in this case, we're talking about a variant of concern.
Let's take a look at how states and territories are reacting to the outbreak. First to New South Wales. The border remains open, but residents are being urged to avoid travel to Victoria. And anyone in Victoria who's visited an exposure site is not permitted to enter New South Wales. South Australia has closed its border to Greater Melbourne except for essential travellers who must complete 2 weeks self-quarantine on arrival. Queensland has declared Victoria a hotspot, meaning its border is closed. Returning residents will need to enter hotel quarantine. In Tasmania, people who've been in Victoria in the past 14 days will not be allowed to enter unless approved as an essential traveller. Western Australia has put up a hard border with Victoria, meaning only travellers with a special exemption can enter WA. The Northern Territory has declared Greater Melbourne and Bendigo as hotspots, meaning arrivals from there will need to complete 2 weeks of supervised quarantine at Howard Springs or Alice Springs. For the ACT, anyone who's been in Greater Melbourne in the past 2 weeks must complete an online declaration. To talk us through what the lockdown means for smaller communities, we're speaking to Danny Claridge, Mayor of Benalla Rural City Council in North East Victoria. Welcome to Regional News. What's been the immediate impact for the community there in Benalla, Danny Claridge, to have these restrictions announced?
It's a bit of a shock again to be locked down. We are used to it because we have been locked down for most of 2020. But it comes with a lot of restrictions and a lot of penalties, and the community is suffering because of that.
And has this affected, what was already planned? I understand we had the Winton supercars scheduled for the weekend. What does that mean for the community when things have to be shut down so quickly?
That's a huge loss to the community. The Winton supercars one of the major or the premier event for the area. So pretty well every accommodation facility within 100 miles of Benalla was booked for this weekend, but unfortunately all of those will be cancelled and postponed until the end of July.
So, Danny, we imagine that it must be incredibly difficult for people to continue keeping their businesses open and life functioning with lockdowns being reimposed and with little warning. What's the sentiment there in the community?
I think the community realises that it is very, very important. This is a very virulent strain of the virus, and it has escaped from Melbourne to Kahuna and Bendigo. So, anywhere in the country needs to be aware that we're only a moment away from having this virus in our community.
It is an anxious time. Danny Claridge, with what's happening there in regard to the vaccine rollout in your region, are there concerns around having enough vaccines available? And indeed, are there enough healthcare providers to deliver those vaccines?
Yeah, locally we are very lucky. I hadn't actually booked in for a vaccine until lunchtime today. I booked in and I'm able to have it tomorrow evening. So there obviously is plenty of vaccine and plenty of people are able to administer it.
Are you seeing a lot of other people in your position also now joining in and thinking it's a good idea at this point to get vaccinated as quick as possible?
I think it's a reminder to everyone to get vaccinated as soon as you possibly can.
And Danny Claridge, how well prepared is the Benalla region generally? Should there be any COVID positive cases recorded there as a result of this latest outbreak?
We are very, very well prepared. We had a pandemic subcommittee organised that met regularly, weekly actually, during 2020. That consisted of the local health services, the GPs, police, ambulance, the council, the SES. So it was very comprehensive, and that group is just sitting there. So if anything did happen, we could activate that group very, very quickly.
And what are your thoughts? Initially, of course, the lockdown has been imposed for 7 days at this stage. What are your thoughts if that lockdown has to actually be imposed for longer?
I am a bit pessimistic. I think that 7 days will not be the end of it, and I would imagine we're looking at more like a couple of weeks, and that's not good for the economy in a regional town like ours, I'm afraid.
Are you able to give a sense of what that economic impact is? I mean, as you said, you've already gone through several lockdowns there. Is it possible to get a sense of how this might affect the economy for that regional community?
Yeah, look, business was just getting back to a sense of normality. We have had a lot of tourists, so businesses have been going very, very well, and I think they were starting to gain a bit of momentum. And unfortunately, this has just put a stop to it. I spoke to a local contractor this morning who had a $6,000 project ready to start, and that's been cancelled, and it's not going to happen.
One of many. We must imagine that's one of many. Danny Claridge, we are going to have to leave it there, but we really do appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. We wish you and the community there all the very best. That is Danny Claridge, who is the Mayor of Benalla Rural City Council. Well, parts of central Queensland's Callide Power Station could be back online as early as next week after a catastrophic fire caused blackouts across much of the state on Tuesday. Investigations are underway into what went wrong at the coal-fired power station, which is one of Queensland's biggest generators. The damaged turbine could be offline for up to a year, but it's hoped the undamaged units can be brought back online soon. Other sources of power have ramped up production to try to avoid further outages. It's been 2 months since the New South Wales mid-north coast experienced the worst floods in living memory. Many hard-hit residents are struggling to recover, but have been working together to rebuild.
When floodwaters surrounded Anne Byasel's house, her biggest concern was the safety of her horses. With the SES unable to reach her, she put out a call for help. Philip Aitken launched a boat, and with another local, the animals were helped to higher ground.
We put the boat in on the main road. There was power lines there and shipping containers floating past.
So there was a lot of dead cattle already on the road. You had the bull sharks, which are already eating the cows that are on the road, and this is a road which normally people drive, Maria River Road, so quite incredible.
9 weeks later, Anne is yet to move back into her home, which is still without running water.
It's hard when there's a lot of stuff to do and to clean, but you can't do it.
Her horses are thriving again, but only after a lot of care. They're at a temporary home on nearby higher ground where Phil and Anne plan to create a large animal evacuation centre for future emergencies.
Hopefully people won't be in the situation that I was in, and that there will be a place to take their horses.
Further down the road, Port Macquarie's North Shore community is also still recovering. Residents were isolated for days during the floods with no way of crossing the Hastings River. We first met North Shore resident Ursula Butlin in the immediate aftermath of the flood. She's still cleaning up and says mould is a huge problem.
I start to go on like chest pain, and then my throat.
Despite the hard work, she has no plans to move.
My kids are born in here and grown up in here, so this is my home.
Further south at North Haven, some elderly residents are yet to return to homes at this holiday park.
Wife died, and then I got flooded out, and then I lost everything, and I can't dwell back onto it. I'm just getting over it and being happy and make things right again.
It's a long road, but people are helping each other. ABC News, Port Macquarie.
A report into the Fraser Island bushfire has revealed an offer to waterbomb was declined by Queensland Parks and Wildlife just days after the blaze began. Communities were threatened and 85,000 hectares of the World Heritage Site were scorched as the fire raged for 2 months. The Inspector General of Emergency Management has been examining the response to the blaze. 38 recommendations made in the report have been accepted by the Queensland Government. A group of parents in regional Victoria claim the NDIS watchdog has failed to act on allegations their disability service provider withdrew vital support at short notice. It comes as the Disability Royal Commission turns its attention to service providers.
Jamie Gibbons-Johns was a poster boy for the NDIS when it was first rolled out across Victoria in 2017.
This is my room, my big room. Hey Jane, do you want to come out, mate, and say hello? That was nearly 5 years ago now, and that picture has changed quite a lot.
The 30-year-old lives with multiple disabilities and requires daily support. But in February, his provider withdrew all services after raising concerns about hygiene at his unit. A decision that left his family blindsided.
He's not the only person who lives with a disability who has some behavioural concerns, who has some continence issues and needs support in all those areas. We felt like Jamie was being blamed for having disabilities.
His family attempted to resolve the issue with the disability provider Windaring, but the provider refused to continue the service. In a statement to the ABC, Windaring said the hygiene issues were an unacceptable risk to everyone and that it offered for a support worker to work at least 2 to 3 months in an independent capacity to provide temporary support.
That he has got a walk-in shower.
His sister Emma lodged a complaint with the NDIS watchdog, the Quality and Safeguards Commission. It wasn't the first to be lodged against Windaring. Kay Atlas says her 31-year-old son turned up for his day program in December 2019, only to be told he wasn't welcome.
The team leader at the time walked out into the room and in front of staff and the other participants said, "What is he doing here?"
She says he was suspended without notice a day after their service agreement ended and was told he couldn't attend his Christmas concert. Ms Atlas complained to the Commission that the suspension felt like retaliation for raising concerns about how his funding was being spent.
I do believe that they had Tim targeted because I questioned the figures earlier on.
Windaring has denied it breached the NDIS practice standards and says the complaints have been investigated by the Quality and Safeguards Commission with no adverse findings against it. The Commission has told Ms Atlas the investigation remains open.
The ABC is aware of at least a half a dozen complaints to the Commission relating to Windaring's practices in just the last 18 months. But no compliance action has been reported to date.
The Parliamentary Committee investigating the NDIS watchdog has heard that across Australia, almost 6,000 complaints were made to the Commission, Only one fine was issued in that time, and almost half the complaints led to no further action.
You cannot investigate, you cannot enforce without the capacity to do that, and that is still quite evidently what the Commission is lacking.
In a statement, the NDIS Commission said it's increased the number of dedicated investigators from 21 to 31, and that every complaint it received was important.
What are you going to look up on the computer?
It's not enough to reassure families still waiting for an outcome.
No one is too hard that you can't provide them with the support they need.
Cassandra Power, ABC News.
Getting doctors to move outside the major cities has been a challenge for a long time. Various incentives have been tried over the years. Now, one family in the New South Wales town of Young is offering a rental subsidy, hoping to attract a much-needed obstetrician.
Ready, Sarah? Steady, go!
Nissa Stadmiller is expecting her third child in September and is planning to give birth at the local hospital. But with just one GP obstetrician in Young, she's worried the days of local maternity services could be numbered. So Ms Stadmiller and her husband Matt, a local councillor, are offering to pay a rental subsidy of $100 a week for a year to help attract a new specialist to the town.
My family are just making this donation to get the ball rolling, to set an example and to try and help the community, not only myself giving birth, but all other mothers in the area.
Previously, there have been up to 7 GP obstetricians in Young, but recruitment efforts over the past few years have been unsuccessful.
They would survive with less and less, and we've now hit a bit of a crisis point with only one left.
This is not a situation unique to one community. Towns across rural and regional Australia struggle to attract and retain doctors and specialists, with maternity one of the services commonly affected.
We just need to think about, as a community, what is on offer and how do you showcase that to attract the right doctor to meet your community needs.
For now, services in Young are assured, with the Murrumbidgee Local Health District funding a locum doctor for the hospital. But it's not a permanent solution.
Obviously, the worst case scenario would be if we don't recruit more GP obstetricians and we lose the obstetric service.
I am very worried that in the future we may not have maternity services and we will be forced to travel to bigger centres like Wagga and Canberra.
An anxious wait in an already stressful time. Molly Gorman, ABC News, Young.
Farmers in the Canberra region are enjoying their best autumn season in more than 2 decades. Many farmers were forced to destock during the prolonged drought, but consistent rainfall has aided a long recovery.
A paddock full of stock. A welcome sight for farmer Tony Griffin.
Come on, that's the way, yes, come on, come on. Come on, you girls, come on.
During the drought, his land was empty because he was forced to destock. The landscape was remarkably dry and depressing.
So tell me what this looked like just 2 years ago.
Well, the dam was almost empty. In fact, you could walk out across to that little island that was so low. There was no grass, the paddocks were bare, it was pretty grim.
It was one of the worst seasons Tony had ever seen, but it's been followed by one of the best.
Not that we've had lots and lots of rain, but we've had rain come at strategic times so that when we start to dry out and the grass might be stopping growing, we get more rain.
South of Canberra, near Tharwa, Andrew Geekie's farm is finally looking lush.
2 years ago was very ordinary. We were in the end of what turned out to be the drought. Stock numbers were down, so it's opportunities in the last 12 months to really keep our numbers and start building our numbers back up.
Now it's about taking advantage of one of his best ever seasons.
There is an old saying, you'll lose more stock in a good year than you will in a bad, just what the stock require. As far as the rapid growth of the grasses go and what the uptake within the grass, minerals, magnesium for example.
Farmers are facing different challenges after the drought, but they're very welcome ones. Isaac Naruzi, ABC News.
4 years after it was delivered to the Australian people, the Uluru Statement from the Heart has been recognised with the announcement of the Sydney Peace Prize. I spoke with Pat Anderson, one of 3 key members of the group behind the statement, about the significance of this award. Pat Anderson, how does it feel for you 4 years on from that statement being delivered so beautifully at Uluru to having it recognised with the Sydney Peace Prize?
A whole range of emotions, but overwhelmed by it all, but also at the same time almost running side by side with that is the wonderful tribute that winning that prestigious award gives to all of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who went through that whole process with us for a year and a half or what have you, and giving up 3 days, their weekends, and sitting down and talking about the Constitution and really doing lots of hard work. So I think I saw that flood of faces when I thought, oh my God, the Sydney Peace Prize. And then immediately my next thought was all of those people that we met and got together from all over the country who gave up so much of their time, not only their time, but their commitment to perhaps a better future. And that's what the statement ended up being, was a gift of healing and love to the nation, specifically given to the Australian people from us.
And significant, I think, as well, that we're talking about the Sydney Peace Prize. Is that something that you think reflects what is behind the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
Yes, well, I think so, because certainly it is an offering of peace. It's an offering to sit down with us. It's also a roadmap for how we might make things better in this country for all of us. Nothing's kind of worked too well for us, and it's a source of, perhaps for a lot of Australians, irritation. But I think there's another group of Australians who want this fixed, they want this settled, they want this organised or done with once and for all, instead of all of us arguing on the 26th of January. So part of the gift is also offering to the nation a new narrative for the country, so that some people, I think, who don't necessarily feel comfortable here might feel a little bit more included, because after all, it's our place. We ain't going anywhere, and we've been here since creation of time. And why wouldn't you want to celebrate that?
What do you think needs to come next to see the effort that went into creating the Uluru Statement actually realised in something concrete for all Australians?
Well, we'll continue to run an education campaign, going out there and talking to as many people who will listen to us, so we're open for all kinds of invitations, explaining to people what the Uluru Statement means, why we did what we did, and what needs to happen. And what needs to happen, in our view, that was said at all of those dialogues, we need now an enshrined in the Constitution voice to Parliament, it's really important, not a legislated voice to government.
So, Auntie Pat, the work continues, but wonderful to have recognition today with the Sydney Peace Prize announcement 2021 for the Uluru Statement from the Heart. For all the work that's already happened, Auntie Pat Anderson, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Miriam.
And you can find more stories like that one from rural and regional Australia anytime on iView. Just type ABC News Regional into the search bar. You'll find full episodes of the program and stories from right across the country. They were once common across swathes of Australia, sometimes even in plague proportions. But an ambitious program that sought to rewild the locally extinct eastern quoll has ended in failure. Despite the setback, National Park rangers are still determined to bring back the cat-like carnivore.
This picturesque bit of bushland in Booderee National Park was until recently home to a predator that went extinct on the mainland in 1963. 20 captive-bred eastern quolls were taken from Tasmania and released into the wild here in 2018. 40 more followed a year later in the hope they could form a viable wild population.
They survived well in the bush, they put on weight, they bred. They're small carnivores, they ate birds, insects, bandicoots, rats.
But after years of intensive monitoring, the trail has gone cold. Despite extensive searches, a quoll hasn't been spotted here since New Year's Day. They're now likely all dead.
It's something that you have to consider when working in this space, because we're talking about threatened species and they're threatened for a reason. There's lots of threats that have caused them to become lower in number.
The carnivores like to travel around on roads, so cars crushed a couple. The few foxes in the area snapped up several, and 3 females who settled near this historic homestead ultimately died of old age. The cute creatures only live for about 3 years in the wild. Their curiosity helps them find food, but can also put them in harm's way.
There was a lot of sightings in the community where they was actually living under people's caravans.
There is some disappointment the population didn't survive here. But researchers say they learned a lot about what works and what doesn't when it comes to rewilding predators, and they're confident that one day this bushland will again be home to quolls. The team has successfully reintroduced vulnerable long-nosed potoroos to the park, as well as endangered southern brown bandicoots.
The concept of rewilding in Australia is really important. We've lost so much over the last 200 years. 30 mammal species have gone completely.
Parks Australia says it's committed to trying again with eastern quolls.
Yeah, it looks good.
It hopes these charismatic cat-like carnivores will eventually find a foothold in a landscape they thrived in for millions of years. James Glenday, ABC News, Jervis Bay.
A new quarantine facility has been set up in South Australia, but it's pigs, not people, staying there. It's one of a number of measures the pig industry is putting in place to ward off a devastating illness known as African swine fever.
South Australia's Clare Valley is well known for its wine, but it also hosts Sabor, one of Australia's largest sperm banks for pigs.
We've got 45 boars here. They service around 6,500 sows.
The boars' samples are collected daily and delivered direct to clients' farms. Seems simple, but for a few years it hasn't been.
The deadly African swine fever has killed a quarter of the world's pigs.
So African swine fever is a virus. When pigs get infected with that virus, they do get very sick and will die.
The virus moved through Asia, getting as close as Papua New Guinea, raising fears for the industry here.
The disease may not be quite as obvious when it gets into a herd now, and it may actually cause much more subtle signs.
So with some state government cash, the sperm bank is upgrading.
A central part of Sabor's elevated biosecurity is something we all know about from the coronavirus pandemic, its very own hotel quarantine facility.
Boars quarantine for nearly 2 months, while a new double-ringed fence keeps feral pigs away, and soon even workers will be separated from their colleagues.
They'll be controlled on what they're allowed to eat, unfortunately, no pork products, which hurts, but anyway.
And it's all being documented.
Those documents can be used in other semen centres or adapted for other pig businesses.
The ultimate aim? To avoid the shutdown of an industry which employs tens of thousands of people. Gabriella Marchant, ABC News, Clare.
That's the latest from ABC Regional News for now. I'm Miriam Corowa. Thank you for your company.
It's the stranger-than-fiction tale that swept the world.
A ship called Tiger King.
Is that your exotic? And created a global icon.